Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, especially given the heat today. We appreciate you being here. I don't know how many people plan to go outside in the garden afterwards. I don't blame you if you do not, but thank you for being here. My name is Kate Gleason, and I am the membership director. I think it's a lot of familiar faces, but I'm the membership director here at the garden, and it is my privilege to help put these programs together and to serve you as members, and just always want to say thank you for that. Before we bring today's speaker to the podium, I do want to, two programs I want to talk about. Our next member speaker series is going to take place on August 12th. That'll be a Tuesday, and we'll be right back here at 11 o'clock. And we'll be joined by 3 or 4 members of our Science and Conservation Division who specifically work on our Latin American program, which is one of our longest running science programs and research programs at the garden. So you'll hear about that history. You'll hear about the work that they're doing to protect biodiversity in various landscapes that ranges from tropical rainforests and high altitude grasslands. So it should be a fantastic program. We did a version of this called our Spotlight series, which is for our Garden Giving Society members. And many people told us it was one of their favorite programs in terms of what they learned about the garden's work, how we do field work, and then what we do when we bring our research back here to the garden. So I anticipate that being a great program. Again, it's August 12th. If you could register for that, we appreciate it. You'll do that either by calling the phone number on the back of your membership card, stopping at the desk today while you're here, or of course going online with your login and password. The other event I want to put on your radar, you might not have seen yet because we just added it to the website, is we're partnering with St. Louis Shakespeare Festival for the kickoff of their annual Torco project, which is always a stripped-down, actor-centric production with a small cast. So after they end their season at Forest Park, they always do Torco. They'll be in about 20 locations around the city, this year putting on a stripped-down version of Midsummer Night's Dream. And we're excited they're going to kick off that series of 20 events here at the Garden on August 19th. That's also a Tuesday. The program will start at 6:30 p.m. You do not have to make reservations. Much like Whitaker, you can bring a picnic. You can bring no glass, but you can bring wine in non-glass containers. And food, any food you'd like, chairs, picnic tables, all that good stuff. So that is August 19th, 6:30 p.m. It's a 90-minute version of A Midsummer Night's Dream with a small 6-person cast. So should be a really fun program. We'll have that out at Cohen Amphitheater. We're delighted to continue our partnership with St. Louis Shakespeare Festival. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce writer Paula Whyman. Paula is the author of the memoir Bad Naturalist, which I think everybody knows is why we're here today, and You May See a Stranger, which is her short story collection that received critical acclaim and was the winner of the 2017 Towson Prize for Literature. Paula's stories have appeared in journals including McSweeney's, Virginia Quarterly Review, Plowshares, the Hudson Review, and the Southampton Review. Her fiction was selected for the anthology Rites of Passage, coming of age stories and memoirs from the Hudson Review. Her nonfiction has been featured on NPR and in the Washington Post, the American Scholar, and the Rumpus. She is co-founder and editor-in-chief of the literary journal Scoundrel Time. Paula has taught in writers in schools programs through the Penn Faulkner Foundation in Washington, D.C., and the Hudson Review in Harlem and the Bronx. Her fiction is part of the curriculum at the Young Women's Leadership School in Harlem, and she has been awarded residences by McDowell, VCCA, the Studios of Key West, and others. Please join me in welcoming Paula today from her wild Virginia mountaintop here to the Missouri Botanical Garden.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kate, and everyone. I just need to grab something here. I wanted to mention I went to the Shaw Nature Reserve yesterday and got a wonderful tour from Quinn Long, who's the director. And I urge everyone to go and see this amazing place if you can, because I was just it was a fascinating place to see the kind of ecological restoration that can be done on grasslands and all kinds of all different habitats, wetlands and so on, and the forest understory. And it's just an amazing place, and their seed collection program is incredible, and the whole thing just made me very jealous. So I really urge everybody to go there. My book, Bad Naturalist is a memoir about my attempts to restore native meadows on a 200-acre mountaintop in the foothills of the Blue Ridge in Virginia, the northern Blue Ridge. It's sort of on the boundary of, it's right next to the Blue Ridge, sort of the Piedmont region. It's a small mountain about 1,300, 1,400 feet, which doesn't sound that big, but because of where it is, it feels big. So how did I end up doing this? A lot of people ask. I ask myself this also. When I was a kid, I was really into bugs. That was sort of my gateway to nature and wildlife and so on. So I would sit and turn over rocks and look for potato bugs. I would follow ants to see where they went. I would collect cicadas and let them crawl on me. I would put caterpillars in bug houses and throw some leaves in there and try to figure out why they weren't eating. And so as I got older, I developed this tendency to deep dive into various topics related to nature. So I would grab onto something and I wouldn't let go until I'd learned everything I could about it, sort of obsessively. And that ranged from carpenter bees to horseshoe crabs to eventually island biogeography. And so I sort of carried this tendency with me throughout my life. And this is kind of a background context to say that eventually my husband and I, like so many people from the suburbs, decided that we wanted to be out in the country instead. We wanted to change our lives. And, I was a child of the suburbs, but I wanted to be in a place where I could be outdoors more. And my husband, who is an Eagle Scout, same thing. Once an Eagle Scout, always an Eagle Scout. So we started looking probably about 30 years ago. And at that time, it was more of a daydream than anything else. You'd sort of stand in a forest or stand next to a river and stare off into the distance and say, would this work? But we had little kids, and it was a little harder to do that at the time. And we both worked, in jobs, and we still work. But eventually, when our kids were off adulting, now they're in their 20s, we were able to, and we're both working from home. We had a little more flexibility, and we decided we were going to make it happen. So maybe about 7 years ago, before the pandemic, we started looking around, and we focused on the northern Blue Ridge area in Virginia. And specifically, we were looking for a house. We were looking for a place with any kind of land. It didn't really matter as long as it was a place where we could be outdoors, forest, field, whatever. I wanted a place where I could have a vegetable garden and even raise a few sheep. I really wanted, and when I say a few, if a farmer hears that, they're thinking 300, and I really meant like 3 sheep. But my husband wanted to be able to, just camp out or something. And so, and at the same time, I thought wherever we end up, somehow I want to plant a small native meadow. And why? Why did I have the idea that I wanted to do that? Because I had been reading lately Doug Tallamy, Nature's Best Hope, about the Homegrown National Park movement, the importance of native plants, which honestly I had not totally paid. All of the deep dives that I'd done about nature, I really hadn't gotten into native plants or understood their connection with the ecosystem until I read Doug Tallamy and some of the related books. So I had read Nature's Best Hope, and I was like, okay, I'm going to plant this native meadow. I'm going to put my writing shed next to it. I'm going to watch the birds flying around. I'm going to watch the flowers swaying in the breeze, and it's going to be very romantic. And I also read Isabella Tree's book, Wilding, which talks about her efforts to allow her farm in England, which I think is around 7,000 acres, to go back to nature. And she even introduces animals that can mimic the behavior of animals that would have naturally lived there. So all of this was in my head while we were looking for this house. And while we were out in this area in the Northern Blue Ridge, someone said, oh, while you're here, you really need to go see the view on this mountain because it's just incredible. It's not like anything else you're going to see here. And we're like, okay. One day, it was the middle of August, which it's like the middle of August here, okay? It's hot, it's bright, it's humid, but we were like, okay, we'll go look at this mountain. So someone brought us to this place. There's a gravel road at the bottom, but then it kind of ends, and it was just rocks and roots. So we hiked up about a mile through the woods, and when we got to the top, there was all of this vegetation that was over our heads. Like we couldn't really see the landscape at that point when we got to this open area. And it was all these yellow flowers, which I didn't know what they were, but they were like over 6 feet tall, dense vegetation. And there was a mowed path just like wide enough for 2 people. And we walked along this path until we got to a high point, and then I could see out and see the actual landscape, which was rolling and steep fields and forested slopes sort of falling away and rocky outcroppings and so on, and these yellow flowers, which still surrounded me as far as I could see. And I looked out at that and I thought, so I was going to plant this small, like maybe 1 acre native meadow. And I eventually found out that this this is what you're looking at here is just one part of the meadow and the Blue Ridge in the background. About 75 or 80 acres of open fields on top of a mountain, which in the East is very unusual. And it was an old farm gone to seed, which was why everything had been allowed to grow up. And then there were these yellow flowers. So I looked at that and I thought, wow, I could really make a difference here. This is something, it's not at all what I was thinking about doing. It's much bigger and more involved, but I could do something really challenging and ambitious here. And my husband was looking at it going, I could make trails, I could camp out. And so we were thinking of it from 2 different angles, but we both sort of came to the same decision that this was it. There was just one little problem, which was there was no house. The road didn't go all the way up. There was no power, no water. It was a farm with no farm buildings. So anyway, I decided to do it. But in the moment, I sort of forgot that I really didn't know very much at all about plants. I was really into insects, wildlife, but I didn't know much about plants at all. And I had no idea how to go about this kind of project, where to start, what questions to ask. I didn't even know what these yellow flowers were that were surrounding me. And in fact, the person who brought us up there told me they were weeds. He called them stickweed. So the first thing I did was go home and look up stickweed and see what could I possibly, and every piece of information I came to about it said, you've got to get rid of this. It's a terrible weed and farmers don't want it in their pastures and livestock can't eat it and all this stuff. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I realized maybe I was asking the wrong question because I couldn't believe that it was actually called stickweed. So then I looked up on a native plant database, and that's when I found it. And that's when I realized that one person's weed is another person's very useful, ecosystem important plant. And luckily, this wasn't a bad weed because it was everywhere. So it was yellow crownbeard. I was going to get to that. It's yellow crownbeard. So if you have a small garden, you might not love having that plant in there because it's very aggressive. But here, in that huge meadow, it's actually a really important plant. So these were some of the organizations that I contacted for information. And fortunately, in the part of Virginia where the mountain is located, there are a whole lot of resources, nonprofits, scientific institutes, and government agencies that were really eager to just come out, take a walk on the mountain with me, and point things out to me. So I talked with people from all of these organizations and almost got a crash course in ecology. And and one of the things I did, there was a conservation group that organized walks on other people's farms. So I would go on these walks and take furious notes about what they were doing in their ecological restoration. And that's how I learned about some of these organizations. And one of the first ones that came out was something called Virginia Working Landscapes, which is part of the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute in Virginia. And they do surveys on private lands because some of you may know that, I used to think that parks were really important, and they are, but grasslands in particular, like 85% of grasslands are privately owned in this country, and over 50% of forests are on private land. So it's great that we take care of our parks, but if private landowners aren't doing anything, it's a big problem. So Virginia Working Landscapes goes out to private lands. They do surveys to inform their research. And so they came out 4 years ago, which was 4.5 years ago when I bought the land, and they did bird surveys and plant surveys. So I started to get then a list of dominant plants on the mountain. And this is this woman is who I call her a plant guru. She's now in charge of ecological restoration at Oak Spring Garden Foundation, which is a former Paul and Rachel Mellon estate in Virginia. So she taught me so much about plants. I mean, just from talking to her, she would point things out to me. And so I got the list of like the dominant plants on the mountain at the time, and here are a few of them. We have a ton of milkweed, which is really fortunate. And let's see, and this is the yellow crownbeard I was talking about, which you can see a monarch on the yellow crownbeard, which is great. We do have a lot of monarch butterflies. And let's see, then we have wild bergamot, and this is a list of some of the others. So a lot of these plants are plants that are good at growing where there is a combination of a lot of non-native grasses to compete with. They can make it up through those grasses. And the little blue stem Indian grass and broom sedge, those are native grasses, and I wish we had more of those. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And some of our trees, this is a 300-year-old white oak, and it was planted in the open. You can see how its shape. It is hollow inside now, but still apparently healthy. And some of you may know that white oaks attract or serves over like 500 pollinators. So it's a very important tree. And I want to mention some of the pioneer trees we have, because I'm trying to maintain those fields that I mentioned as open meadow because they've been open for hundreds of years. And in certain areas, the pioneer trees will come in, particularly the yellow poplar or tulip poplar, and will try to form a monoculture and take over. So unfortunately, part of what we have to do is control succession in some of those fields. The black locust and the sassafras, I don't really worry about as much. I actually really like them. The black locust will form little clusters or groves, but for the most part doesn't take over in the same way the poplar does. We also have a lot of, well, almost everything is a food tree, but these are some of the fruit and nut trees we have. We have lots of persimmons, tons of black cherry, which I'm going to talk about. And this was an area that I hadn't explored, because you can imagine when the total property is over 200 acres. So it's taking me a while to explore everything. I still haven't been on every inch of the property, and a lot of it is very steep. So that's another issue. So this viburnum was at the bottom of a very steep slope, hidden behind some overgrown non-native plants that I finally bush hogged, which is, bush hogging is like mowing on steroids when you have tall, dense material that you can't handle with a regular mower. And I found this viburnum there, and it was in flower just at that moment after we mowed, so that was really nice surprise. One of the things that I really most enjoy and get most excited about is just walking around, discovering things for the first time and trying to figure out how they're connected. So I'm still into insects. My kids, who I mentioned, are in their 20s. When they come over, they still like point out interesting spiders to me. Mom has to see this. So when I first started exploring, I mean, that was sort of my way of getting to know the place. I would make little maps for myself. I would draw terrible little doodles that nobody could possibly decipher, even me, a lot of the times. And I would see something like this, and I would ask questions about what was that on the leaves? Why did it look like this? These little wormy looking things on the leaves. Let's see if I can use the pointer. Okay. So this is a big black cherry, and we have tons of black cherry on the mountain. And some of you may know there are over 450 caterpillar species on the black cherry. So it's actually a really great, important tree, although farmers don't want it if they have livestock, because when it drops the leaves, they're toxic. And the more dead the leaves are, the more toxic they are. So if the livestock eat them, they can get very sick. But I am happy to have black cherry. And when I saw this, I was really worried, because I thought, I have all these black cherries and it's being attacked by something. Are they all going to die? And of course, coming from the suburbs, the immediate mentality would be, I have to kill that. I've really got to spray that with something, probably, horticultural oil, something. What am I going to do? This is terrible. But, obviously on the mountain, that might have been my first thought, like, oh no, is it going to kill the tree? But then when I did a little research, first of all, I found out those weren't worms. They were galls. They are black cherry leaf galls, and they're caused by the black cherry leaf gall mite. Yeah, how did it get named that? I don't know. So the mite lays its eggs, and that gall forms, and the larva hatches in there, and sometimes the adult mite also stays in there. But the really cool thing is that there's a caterpillar that eats that gall, and it'll eat the larva, it'll eat the mite, anything that's inside there, it'll eat. So it's like a carnivorous caterpillar, which I thought was really interesting. And when it turns into a butterfly, which honestly now, and I think it is actually called the black cherry leaf gall mite caterpillar. But I don't remember the name of the butterfly now. But when it turns into a butterfly, it then pollinates the tree. So when I think about, there are over 450 caterpillars that use this tree, well, is this one mite really going to kill this tree? But if I were still of the suburban mentality that I was going to spray that tree, I wouldn't kill those mites because they're protected by the galls. I would just kill the caterpillar that eats them and all the 400 other types of caterpillars on the tree. So the other cool thing I found out is that there's an ant that protects the caterpillar from getting eaten by wasps. So this whole like, and that's because the ant likes a nectar that the caterpillar secretes. So anyway, there's this whole interconnected world that lives on this cherry tree. And if 450 species of caterpillar aren't killing, obviously, a healthy tree, then I'm not worried about it. And it's things like that that I get really excited about learning. So one of the things that I learned from the experts I talked with, particularly conservation biologists from NRCS, which is part of USDA. They advise farmers and landowners about ecological restoration on their land and old fields and so on. This is an apple blossom. The mountaintop was an apple orchard for about 150 years. And one of the reason that's important is because whatever happened to the mountain before is going to be, what I'm dealing with now. So kind of, it was an apple orchard, so there were orchard grasses. If there were trees, they were cut down, to plant the apple trees. And so that was from about the 1830s to 1970. Basically, the whole Piedmont area in Virginia was apple orchards, and they would plant the apple trees on these mountains so they were above the frost line. And they would resist the frost that way. They wouldn't get damaged. And these trees, so if you're going from a natural area, obviously, to an orchard, you're already sort of degrading the conditions. You're introducing new plants. And then after that, it became a cattle farm. If you can believe somebody driving cattle up these steep slopes to get to the top. I mean, I don't know. Half the people don't even want to drive up our road. So driving cattle up there seems nutty, but they did it, and that was for about 40, 50 years. And in between there, somewhere, there was also a cherry orchard, and we still have about 3 dozen cherry orchard trees out of like thousands that were there before. So when it went from an apple orchard to a cattle farm, they bulldozed all the apple trees and, planted hay grasses. And so now I've got hay grasses, orchard grass, fescues. I've got the native plants that I mentioned. I've got invasive plants. And by the way, this apple tree, there was one apple tree left from the time that all of those, 100,000 apple trees were originally on the mountain. And I don't know how old it was, but in a storm a year ago, it fell over. So sadly, no more apple trees. Unfortunately, we have a lot of invasive plants, and I think about at least 80% of my time is spent dealing with invasive plants. This is a grove of ailanthus trees, or tree of heaven. I understand you have those here too. Behind me are sort of the baby trees, or the rootlings. The parent tree is sort of out of the picture. I eliminated this grove of trees 2 years ago, and there were no other trees within 50 feet to send out, because this trees will send out shoots 50 feet under the ground that will then sort of grow up in the middle of a field like, Martians. But they're growing back now. I mean, it's probably seeding from other from other trees on the property because we haven't been able to get rid of all of them. And of course, we also now have spotted lanternflies. So I don't think you have those here, or at least I haven't seen them here. I hope you never do. We also have the princess tree, Paulownia, which grows like, I don't know, 8 feet in the first year. These two just popped up in the middle of a field, and they pop up everywhere. We have, I tend to discover multiflora rose whenever I bush hog a field and find it lining the edge of the woods. Multiflora rose was planted intentionally as a windbreak for hedgerows, living fence kind of thing all over Virginia and I think a lot of other places. Come back. This is an orchard cherry tree, and these vines are. I cut these. These were. This was multiflora rose. That's about like this big around. So fun times. I don't know if you have mile a minute. I think you might have some mile a minute vine here. I hope you don't have as much as I do. The picture on the right shows it when it's dead, and it covers everything and smothers everything. It grows 6 inches a day, fortunately not a mile a minute, but still fast enough. And it has little stickers all over it, and it just basically covers everything, and it goes to seed like now. So if you don't get it off before it goes to seed, and it will continue growing until November. So that's one of the things I deal with. And then stiltgrass, everything grows big on the mountain. There is a pokeweed bush behind all that stiltgrass. It's about 4 feet high. And of course, the stiltgrass I'm supposed to pull in August when it's 95 degrees outside. Because if you pull it too early, it just grows back. So, and lots of autumn olive. I'll mention the autumn olive because just this spring, I had a field that was invaded with about 3 dozen autumn olive plants that were like 3 to 5 feet high. And I pulled them all. And I'll show you what happened after that. I wanted to show you this because I'm pretty sure you have musk thistle here, nodding thistle, and then that's the native thistle on the other side. I learned firsthand that goldfinches collect the fuzz from the thistle and use it as nesting material. And so goldfinches nest really late, some of you probably know. And so the native field thistle blooms late. And their nesting is somehow timed to that. But I did notice them also taking material from the invasive musk thistle, which made me a little sad. They also feed their nestlings the seeds. They don't feed their nestlings caterpillars like other birds do. So the native field thistle and a few other plants are really important for them. Okay, so in case you didn't have enough invasive plants to deal with, maybe you're like me and you have a lot of deer on your property. And I am from the Bambi generation, or one of the many Bambi generations that thinks they're cute and their eyes are like my dog's eyes, and I can't shoot them. So what to do? Anyway, deer obviously love to eat native plants. They don't so much love non-native plants, so they'll hoover up all the native plants on your property and leave the non-native plants to spread, and they also carry the seeds and so on. So we were told in no uncertain terms by both the State Department of Forestry and a certified forester who wrote a forest management plan for us that we needed to get rid of the deer. But, there are like 1 million deer. Let's get some wolves. What's a mountain lion? That would be good. The other problem, I think this is a good illustration of this. The upright plants are native grasses. So Indian grass, broom sedge, little blue stem are the more common native grasses we have. But all that stuff on the ground below them, the flopped over stuff, that's all non-native fescues. And I don't know if you've ever seen a bobwhite quail, but their babies are like the size of my thumb, and they can't navigate in all that dense growth. And the fescues and the other non-native grasses will just form a dense mat. So they'll also prevent other native plants from growing. And they'll take all the nutrients and the sunlight and so on. So it's a problem both for if you want to encourage ground nesting birds, which is one of the things I wanted to do, and it's also a problem for getting more of a variety of native plants, like the crownbeard, goldenrod, milkweed can make its way through all of that stuff. But other more delicate native plants may not be able to. And one of the fortunate things that I was told by conservation biologists and restoration ecologists was that we have lots of native plants in the seed bank, if I could just get this stuff out of the way. But and one of the problems, it was a good thing we did, because we can't very easily seed on this property because it's so steep, rocky, highly erodible. The seeding methods that would have been advised and that would have been, cost share or grant funded would not be advisable on most of this property. So, what to do? My goal, from listening to Doug Tallamy talk and reading about what he did, was to aim for, just improving the balance of native plants and non-native plants. And my goal is 80-20, 80% native plants, and that might be unrealistic, but it's sort of a field by field issue, because some fields will do better than others. And people talk a lot about baseline condition. I don't know if you've heard that term, but it's sort of the condition that people have in mind. When you say restoration, it's a little bit misleading because the term itself implies going back to something. And there is no really going back when you have a different climate, different soil content, different plants that you're dealing with that weren't there at whatever past time you want to choose. So I think the only option is going forward to something, the best possible achievable condition. And a lot of times also the baseline condition is just the one you remember from when you were a kid. Well, there was a forest here. And a lot of people don't know that the South was full of grasslands. In fact, I think these short grass prairie plants, there was actually more variety of prairie plants in the South than in the Midwest. Don't throw things. but there's fossil evidence of that. And what happened was during bad economic times, so the European farming methods came in, plowed everything, depleted the soil, killed all the prairie plants, and then bad economic times came, the farmers had to leave, abandon their land, and because the soil was so changed, then it grew up into forest. So then you see people grew up with closed canopy forest in places thinking that that was the original condition. And that is indeed what I thought was the case on the mountain. I thought this was closed canopy forest. It had to have been. But I wanted to keep at least part of it open because this whole ecosystem had grown up around the idea of these meadows. But then I had a scientist who specializes in grasslands came out and looked around. He looked at all the rock outcroppings, the kind of plants we had, and he said, this was a savanna. This was grassland with occasional trees, and it would have been maintained naturally by lightning-induced fires every few years. So that was like, okay, now I feel much more justified in keeping it open if I can, and that the oak tree that I showed you at the beginning, it wouldn't have grown the way it grew if it had been in a forest. It would have been tall and sort of skinny, and instead it's sturdy and spread out. So what do I do? I have to make room for these native plants, and I do that through that's my weed wrench, by the way. It weighs about, I don't know, feels like it weighs 50 pounds, but it's probably like 15. Combination of regular mowing, bush hogging, forestry mulching, which is basically pulverizing things, and spot treating with herbicide, direct treating. I don't do broadcast treating, but I treat things directly. I pull things by hand a lot. Like I mentioned, the 3 dozen autumn olives. And my goal there is just to keep invasive plants from getting into a new place. So let's see, a couple of examples. This is stilt grass by one of our gates, and I pulled a bunch of it, again, 95 degrees and the middle of August. Why? It's just, very unpleasant, but that's when you have to do it. And I always have to take a shovel and stab around the ground to make sure there are no copperheads. And then I pulled it, there's goldenrod behind it, and then there's garlic mustard underneath it. So that was a nice gift. Garlic mustard has to wait for next time. And here I am, in futility, pulling mile-a-minute vine. But one thing I didn't mention, which is a very important tool that I wish I could use more. I was telling Quinn about this yesterday. I really need a crew to come work here, but my crew is me, my husband, and my sons when they're in town, and then the man who does our bush hogging. But we did do prescribed burns, and I would like to do that a lot more. This was sort of a test field, and the plant guru I mentioned from the Smithsonian helped me select the fields to burn because it was important to find fields that had a high concentration of native plants, so that you kind of know that, okay, there are more native plants here, and I'm not going to get, say, a field full of spotted knapweed if I burn this, which is another invasive plant that's pretty bad in parts of the mountain. And so the Department of Forestry, the State Department of Forestry did our burns, and they cut the fire lines and everything. When they cut the fire lines, they basically turn over the sod, which unfortunately allows unwanted plants to come in grow in the fire lines afterwards, but you do what you can. And this was a flare-up caused by mile-a-minute vine. Mile-a-minute is very, it's a fire hazard, honestly. This is after the burn, kind of looks almost close up, kind of looks like coffee grounds. And a few weeks later, this is the first field I showed you with all the smoke, the native plants start growing, because we did our burns in March, and this is what it looks like in early spring. And then there were some rewards that were very exciting. So I had a botanist and another scientist come out and tell me that I would never see an orchid in the meadow because of the way it had the agricultural damage that had been done to it. But a few months ago, I was walking with a friend who knows plants much better than I do, and she found a lady's tresses orchid at the edge of the field that we had burned. So that was really exciting for me. And this is just last week in the field where I pulled all those autumn olives. So we have wild bergamot, we have yarrow, crown beard, goldenrod, there's deer tongue in there. So this is basically, and this is all, we didn't plant any of this. It just grows. So what have I learned? This picture, by the way, is a vole tunnel. Yeah, I like it because it looks like a question mark. There are vole tunnels all over the place, and this is why I say one of the most exciting things for me is learning about the cool interconnections among the wildlife and plants on the mountain, and it's just a never-ending source of, excitement because I have this ridiculous level of curiosity that. But I learned that, first of all, I'm not a patient person. I've never been patient, so I chose the slowest possible project to do that's basically going to be going on after I'm dead. And I learned that in conservation, there is no perfect approach, at least in ecological restoration. There's no approach that's going to work the same way every time, and there's no guarantee. There's no guaranteed outcome, and no one's going to come to me and say, oh, first do this, then do that, and you're done. It's just not going to happen. And every single decision I had to make was a trade-off. And that was also very hard for me because I was still stuck in that perfectionist mode. Okay, I want to get the exact right answer. I want to do the exact right thing. But no matter what I did to help one thing, I was probably going to harm something else. And it was just a balancing act. So I'll give you an example. The mowing and bush hogging schedule was constantly confusing to me. But I finally ended up, because different experts would tell me different things. Like if you're interested in bats, you have to mow at this time. If you are interested in turtles, you have to mow at this time. If you're trying to save these birds, you have to mow at that time. But the general recommendation was to mow in March. And when I say mowing, I'm still talking about bush hogging. So mow in March and mow about a third of the meadow, a different third of the meadow each year, so that everybody always has a place to get away. And so that you're not destroying all of the winter habitat and so on. But the idea of March is that it's really the end of the winter. Most creatures are finished using it, and the ground nesting birds haven't started up yet. But then I found out, again, this grassland scientist came out and he said, you have a lot of woodcocks here, I bet. And if you have woodcocks, you want to mow in February. I was like, what? Just don't do this to me. So he said, because the woodcocks start nesting in March. I'm like, okay. So this year I mowed in February. And then at the beginning of March, I went up to the top of the mountain at dusk, and I watched the woodcocks doing their courting ritual, which involves flying straight up into the sky until they disappear above a cloud, and then dive bombing back down and they're making these interesting sounds. And they would land about 10 feet away from me, all around. And there were so many woodcocks. So this guy was right. Tons of woodcocks on the mountain. And part of that is because you can kind of tell by the pictures, it's really not a grassland. We have way more forbs than we do grasses, and the woodcocks like that kind of habitat. So, I'll mention the voles before I stop. The voles, okay, if you're a gardener, you hate voles, I know. They girdle the trees, they eat, roots and all that stuff. But if you have a big meadow, the eastern meadow vole is actually not a bad creature to have because voles plant white oaks. Sort of like jays that Doug Tallamy talks about, they will take the acorns and hide them for later and forget where they put them, and then they'll grow. And if the deer don't eat them, then you'll get oak regeneration. The other thing they do is there's this weevil that will lay its eggs in the budding acorn. And, the larva will hatch and it will eat the inside of the acorn. And like if you find an acorn that has a little hole in it on the ground, sometimes that's what it was the weevil emerging. Well, even though voles are normally vegan, they like these larvae for extra protein in the winter. So they'll look for the acorns that have the larvae in them, and they'll collect them and hoard them. And so they're moving them away from the tree. And whether they get eaten or not, they can't complete their life cycle back on that tree because they're too far away or they're eaten. So voles can be good. A lot of people want to know what's changed on the mountain. We did add some bluebird nest boxes, and I'll mention that 4 years ago when we did those, we did plant and bird surveys, the Smithsonian did. And what they do is they go on a few different dates throughout the season, and they'll go to a few different locations, the same locations each time. Well, the first time, 4 years ago, out of all of the survey spots and dates, they heard one bluebird. This time, because they did a new set of surveys this year after 4 years so we could find out what changed. This time they saw 8 bluebirds at the first stop on the first day. We have tons of bluebirds now. And they're not just nesting in the boxes. They're everywhere. We also, I'm really excited to be able to have research happening on the mountain. So in addition to the bird and plant surveys, they're doing a pilot bat study. So this is an ultrasonic microphone that records bat passes, and then they get a readout and they can tell which species of bat are using the mountain. And they got over 3,500 passes in like 6 weeks, I think. And there are 5 bat species. So the preliminary data. So that was exciting. And we're part of this Grassland Bird Initiative study, which is a collaboration among several organizations. So they gave us American kestrel nest boxes. The American kestrel is a raptor in decline, and they're studying the kestrel in Virginia. So we didn't get nesting kestrels this year, but they often don't come the first year. So we're hoping next year. And a lot of people ask me, what can I do? I don't have 200 acres. Please don't get 200 acres, and don't try to do that. But and a lot of you are here probably already inclined to do this sort of thing. But I often tell people to start with something you have an affinity for. So if you're really into birds or you're really into butterflies, plant one thing, whether it's in a pot or on your patio or, one spot in your yard. Pick one native plant and see what comes to it. But please, not a butterfly bush. That's not a native plant. Yeah, I did that. I planted one of those 20 years ago, but I didn't know any better. So see what comes to it. I think it can be very empowering and motivating to just do one small thing. Start small. That's my advice, is start small. And now I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, we have a microphone's coming your way.
I'm a native of the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. You haven't said exactly where your mountain is.
Oh, it's Rappahannock County. In Rappahannock County.
Native of Warren County.
Oh, okay. Right next door.
Here we go. I'm going to go over here.
So did you end up having a house there, or are you just living with the animals?
That is a great question. We finally do have a house there. It was finished about 6 months ago. Yeah, so for 3.5 years or so, I was driving back and forth. I'd arrive in the morning and go home exhausted and sweaty in the evening. So it's really nice to be able to actually be there all the time now.
Oh, here's another one. I'll go right.
What's the difference between a vole tunnel and a mole tunnel?
Well, moles eat insects, first of all. So moles are not bad unless you have them in your yard. But vole tunnels are kind of like raised. It almost looks like something like ran directly under the soil, and it's often looks like a dirt track, almost like a raised dirt track. But if you step on it, it'll be soft and it'll sort of cave in. They don't leave big piles or holes or anything like that.
With all the invasive plants that you have, I'm over here.
Where are you?
Over here.
I'm over here.
Oh.
With all the invasive plants that you have you thought about having goats eat, sections?
I have. I thought about goats, and I thought of sheep will eat spotted knapweed. I thought about bringing in goats. We didn't have a water source for a very long time. That was a whole drama. We drilled a lot of dry wells. So now that we have water, I could do something like that. But we would also need guardian animals because we have coyotes, bobcats, bears. We have a lot of predators that could be dangerous. So it would have to be closely monitored. But I still have I still want to have some animals, but I feel like I need to get everything in order. And to rent goats is actually really expensive.
Way back in the back.
How did you protect yourself from ticks and rattlesnakes? And did you get any tick-borne diseases?
Oh, not yet. Yeah, well, I had a tick on my scalp a couple of weeks ago that I found in the middle of the night, and I woke up my husband and made him take it out. Anyway, I basically cover myself from head to toe in clothing, and I spray permethrin on my boots, and I spray off on everything else. But the snakes, I have snake-proof boots that come up to my knees, so when the snake bites through it, there's like another layer and they can't get to you. But I'm also very careful when I'm, reaching into an area. I first sort of jab at it with some kind of tool, which is not a guarantee of anything. We do have a lot of snakes.
Any final questions? Looks like we have a couple more right over there.
We'll take this one. Sorry, I'm only halfway through the book, so maybe you addressed it in the book. But of the 200 acres, how much have you begun to convert? And also in your slide, you showed the area where you had done the burn and then it grew back. Are you planning to burn other areas?
Yeah, I would like to burn a lot more areas. It's an issue getting a burn day, both because of weather. It can be very windy on the mountain, and the wind. They want the wind to be even lower than they would in a flat area, and they want the humidity to be slightly higher to help control the fire. So that's one thing that it's hard to get that combination. And then they also they're very short-staffed right now, and they have been for a couple of years. So just waiting. There's a lot of waiting involved. And as far as how much I've done, it's really, I've done things in lots of places on the meadow, but they're in different stages. And a lot of it depends on when I can get people to help me, which is the other thing in that area. Labor is very hard to come by, and there are a lot of people doing similar work or doing some work on their property. So we're all sort of competing for the same like 3 people who come all the way from Charlottesville, an hour and a half, or the guy who I talk about in the book, the guy who I'm friends with who does our bush hogging, it took him a long time to understand what ecological restoration was really about and how I didn't just want fescue, because he was like, well, if you want grass, just mow it and you'll get grass. It'll keep. I'm like, that's not really. But he understands now. So it's also a matter of just like helping people learn, helping the people who do the landscaping learn that your goals are different. Different people have different goals. So that's a learning curve and a process.
So you mentioned bears. So
Oh, yeah.
you have a house built up there. Do you have any problems with bears getting in your trash cans, or do you have to carry any spray with you?
No, not really. We have seen them on all of our trail cameras. And I did realize at some point that all of our doorknobs are levers. I thought that was maybe not the best idea. But no, they don't. I mean, they're not far from the house where we've seen them, but they don't come up to the house. We have a dog that might make a difference, but and we keep our trash cans inside for we have a lot of raccoons also. So, so they haven't been a problem.
Was this private land or public land that you?
This is private land. Yeah. It was an old farm, and the farm buildings were all in the valley. And that land with the farm buildings was sold separately. Yeah.
My least favorite part of restoration is broadleaf herbicide. But do you ever use that to eliminate some of those broadleafs and allow the grasses to flourish?
I've only done spot treatments, and we've treated invasive trees directly. We've done things like treat Japanese honeysuckle that like winds its way through the meadow. In the winter, we'll spot spray mile a minute. I haven't done very much of that. It would probably be good to do,
All right.
but
We'll take one final question over here. Exposed rock.
oh, a ton. Well, I just learned what a glade was yesterday. That I'm glad
Thank
that
you,
it's
Quinn.
Quinn told me it's not a room freshener. So I might have some. But we have a lot of very large rock outcroppings. We also have flat, large, like table rock kind of things, and we have a ton of interesting lichens also on a lot of these rocks. Which is also something I'm kind of obsessed with.
I was just going to end that with more to explore, I guess.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Paula, for your wonderful talk.